So there's this one guy in the Old Testament who God gave the best gifts, promises, and blessings, but he still ended up in a pretty bad place. Actually, I think this probably applies to a number of people in the Old Testament, but the one I'm talking about specifically here is Solomon. But even though he ended up in a bad place, his gifts and promises still point us to Jesus. So first of all, Solomon is known for his wisdom. In 1 Kings 3, God appears to Solomon and asks him whatever he wants to have. And what Solomon asks is something that God is really happy to give him, and that's wisdom. And so that's what he gets. But Solomon's wisdom eventually failed him. And it's later in the Bible, in 1 Corinthians 1 verse 24, that we read that Jesus himself is called the power of God and the wisdom of God. So it's Jesus himself who is the wisdom that the wisdom of Solomon is pointing to. A second thing in Solomon's life that points to Jesus is the temple that he built for God. In 1 Chronicles 17 verses 11 through 12, God is talking to David. He's giving him a promise, and he says this: "When your days are fulfilled, that you must go and be with your fathers, then I will set up one of your descendants after you, who will be from your sons, and I will establish his kingdom. He shall build for me a house, and I will establish his throne forever." So this is God speaking to David about his descendant who will build a house for him. And in the book of Kings and Chronicles, we read that that descendant is Solomon, who will build a temple for God. So in that way, these verses are speaking about Solomon. It was Jesus who said in John chapter 2, "Destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up." And it also says he was speaking about the temple of his body. So what we see here is that the temple that Solomon built is a foreshadowing of the eternal temple that Jesus will build, which is Jesus' own body. And who does the Bible say is the body of Christ? We are. Okay, now a third thing about Solomon is that he's known as the king or the prince of peace, because he's actually the only king during whose reign there was peace throughout the whole land. Now I love that we read about Jesus that he is called the Prince of Peace. It's one of the names he's given in Isaiah 9 verse 6. So the peace that God gave to Solomon during his rule is a foreshadowing of the peace that Jesus is giving us for eternity. Alright, now this fourth one is actually really interesting too. Psalm 72 is a psalm that is ascribed to Solomon himself. And so in verses 7 and 8, he is writing about himself when he writes, "May he also rule from sea to sea and from the river to the ends of the earth." Okay, then a couple hundred years later, there's this prophet called Zechariah. And in his book, in chapter 9 verse 10, he talks about the Messiah who would be coming. And then he says the following: "And he will speak peace to the nations, and his dominion will be from sea to sea and from the river to the ends of the earth." Zechariah probably knew this psalm by Solomon. And so what he's doing here is connecting the psalm that Solomon wrote to the future Messiah. And it's Jesus' rule and reign that would be forever. And his rule and reign would be from the river to the ends of the earth. In other words, everywhere. If you want to see a longer version of this video, make sure to click the link below. So guys, be blessed, and I'll see you in the next video.